Hello everyone, this is Ben coming to you again with Call It Fit. In today's video, we are going to go over mobility as it applies to the squat. I organized this by muscle group for simplicity, but there is a lot of overlap between the different muscles and muscle groups that go into the squat. So I do think it's important that you try pretty much all of these diagnostic tests to see what might be limiting your squat if you feel that it applies to you. Let's get started. This first demonstration is to emulate what it might look like if you have limited mobility in either your glute or your hamstring. What you'll notice here is that I have pretty liberal knee flexion, but I have very limited hip flexion. As a result, I am unable to keep my center of gravity over the center of my foot, and as you can see, it causes my heels to leave the ground. If you lay on the ground and lift one leg as high as you can, you should be able to see the limit of your mobility on the portion of your posterior chain below the hip. However, in order to be sure that it is your glute and not your hamstring, you need to do this with the leg bent so that the hamstring is not a limiting factor. Much like in a proper squat, you should be able to get your knee to go past your hip. If you find that it is the glute that is hindering your mobility, then you can go ahead and try this stretch, which I've demonstrated in previous videos. This movement is not exclusively for the purpose of mobilizing the glutes, but obviously it's very effective in doing that. But what you'll see is in this portion, when I drive my elbow towards the ground, that's actually the part that puts the glute into a deeper stretch. And lastly, this portion of what is called the 90-90 stretch is the part that is most effective for stretching the glute. Though it's not obvious, what I'm doing is voluntarily resisting this stretch by pushing my foot into the ground and then after a few seconds releasing that tension to further sit into this stretch. Now, if you find yourself having trouble staying balanced when you go into the squat, then this might have to do with your hamstrings. This could be stiffness in the glutes or the ankles, but we have a test to see if it is specifically the hamstrings. Naturally, people reach for their toes to stretch their hamstrings, but as you can see here, most of that movement is coming from my back. And you could test that by switching to a neutral back position, going into this hip hinge and seeing how much further away you are from your toes than you were the first time. Again, glute stiffness could be a factor, but you should be able to feel where the tightness is. Here's a simple stretch you can try. Just lay on your back, put a band or a strap around your foot, and pull your leg as far up as you can. This works best if you can already get your hip to around 90 degrees. Try to lock your leg straighter and straighter until you acclimate to this end range, and then you can put a little force against this stretch for a few seconds before relaxing and pulling deeper. This stretch is ideal for if you have such tight hamstrings that you can't even approach 90 degrees of hip flexion with your leg straight. The goal here is to slightly elevate the foot, push your hand into the hip of that elevated foot, and pull your hips back. If, when at the bottom of a squat, you notice there is some excessive extension at your lower back, this could have to do with having a tight groin. Some of you may have heard this referred to as the butt wink. Because the groin is comprised of several lesser-known muscles, I thought it would be useful to go over a diagram. Here we have the gracilis, which is responsible for flexion at the hip, flexion at the knee, and adduction. And the adductor longus adducts and flexes the hip. Upon seeing these, it may occur to you that when you have a tight groin, you may have a difficult time pushing your knees apart during hip flexion. So for this reason, you must assume a narrower stance, which means your lower back has to work harder. And lastly, we have the adductor magnus, which may have a more direct impact on the posterior tilting of the hip. Because of how it attaches to the femur and the hip, you can see how tightness here could cause your hip to be pulled backwards in the bottom of a squat. Here is a stretch you can carefully ease into for the groin by supporting your chest high off the ground, putting your hips at 90 degrees, putting your knees at 90 degrees, and slowly lowering and spreading your knees apart. Also notice that I am attempting to put my back into a more neutral position. As you acclimate, you can spread your knees further and get closer to the ground, and then eventually go down to your elbows and work towards pulling your back into a neutral position from this lowered stance. If you can already squat to around 90 degrees, but you want to sit deeper, which you should want to, then you can try this, where you hold your feet forward, drive your elbows into your knees, and turn as far as you can. Now, this is similar to a previous demonstration of a mobility limitation, but what I want to emphasize here is that I really have to keep my chest far forward in order to stay balanced. This could be due to limited ankle mobility. Because my knees cannot come very far forward, then my hip is very far behind my heel, and I have to compensate for this by falling very far forward with my chest. A simple stretch for the ankle is to plant the foot in this lunge position, keep the heel planted, and shift your weight forward. It's also helpful to simply do standing calf raises with a lot of emphasis on the stretch portion of the movement. Hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions or requests for other exercises you would like to see me demonstrate, then go ahead and leave that in the comment section. Otherwise, a like, a follow, and a share would be very much appreciated. Or subscribe if you're on YouTube, because I've started doing that now. So yeah, anyway, see you guys next time.